So episode 7 is pretty much a character building episode for Tsurunuki and Octa. Tsurunuki is a bit of an attitude where he believes he's an ace driver, which Octa shoots down, pun intended. And it makes sense, Octa's the ace, while Tsurunuki is a new driver. Though, one of the traps of being children who are aces, but claim to be humble, not that Octa claims that he's humble himself, is when they use humility as a point of pride. Such a sticky paradox. Anyways, Black Shinkalion time. Normally I don't comment on the giant monstrous beings, but this one is probably one of my favorites simply because it is very simple. We're also introduced to a new villain, Seiryu. Given that he's young in nature, if you all guessed that he was going to get redeemed, congrats. After all, when have children in any piece of media ever played the big bad and stayed the big bad evil through and through? Oh, and he's voiced by Kai Shindo, who voices Jiro from My Hero Academia. Tsurunuki intends to beat this starfish by himself, but obviously Octa isn't having any of it. This goes very poorly. Tsurunuki attempts to strike Starstream, and yes, that's the name, with a drill, and Octa attempts to shoot it. Starstream can apparently turn into a jet, hence the reference. And when Hayato slashes it, Seiryu basically laughs this off, because he can see through the invisible barrier. Kid's got some tricks up his sleeve, and one of those tricks is regeneration like an actual starfish. If you rip him in half, they can regenerate into new bodies. They also reveal they can shoot lasers, whoops, and create drill blades, whoops. Yeah, it's obviously adapting to the Shinkalions. Futaba tells Octa and Tsurunuki to work the hell together or they'll get crushed. Hayato gives everyone a lead to follow, allowing Tsurunuki and Octa to blow up their respective targets. Okay, I just love the edgelord Seiryu so much, it's hilarious to watch him. Meanwhile, the lab manages to come back with the results basically saying what we're saying. This technology is nuts. The damage was minimal, thankfully. However, Futaba would like to say their first mission went well, but let's be honest, no. Guess whose shoddy teamwork gets called out? You see, in a plot like these, you normally get the moral about how teamwork is great, but it's hard to write plots without being too saccharine. Well, plots like this without being too saccharine. Personally, I'm just here for the antics of it all. Octa and Tsurunuki are going to be at each other's throats throughout this whole episode. Honestly, it's kinda hilarious, and honestly, they're also children, so what did you expect? Don't worry, Hayato, you're going to get your teamwork problems very soon. With Director Hayasugi, you see what we're told earlier about the starfish thing. Hayato suspects this is deliberate, an observation his dad agrees with, and I love the terse way of saying just evolve and defeat them. Basically, to force these two to get along, they're going to be sharing a dorm. Are we sure this isn't an excuse to have a cost-cutting measure? I'm sure he totally needs to get back at them for damaging the Shinkalions, or he needs to find some money somewhere. Hell, maybe they just upgraded security like I told them and thus need to take money from somewhere. They don't like this. Also, he's getting transferred, Hokuto, not anyone else, is getting transferred to Kyoto. He's been assigned there, and he doesn't know if he can do this. Speaking of transfers, Tsurunuki transfers to Hayato's school. So basically, the only kid with a brain in the class goes, "This is sus." Also, Azusa doesn't say anything, but the subtitles just say stare. Now we get the dorm room antics, where Octa has drawn our red line in the dorm room. Unfortunately, we are denied more antics with these two at the arrival of 3 giant star streams. Azusa is brainstorming YouTube video ideas, and apparently the dock workers believe that uploading this to YouTube is a good idea. As opposed to, running the hell away. Sadly, I expect this from Gen Z, but not these guys. Their mission is to obliterate the 3 so that they don't simply divide infinitely. Then they get their asses handed to them. Badly. Hayato tells them that they need to work together on this. Yeah, the message for about togetherness ends up going to the wayside when Hayato ends up taking a blast for Octa and Tsurunuki. Hayato's motivation for taking a potentially lethal shot is to shield his dad from worries, recklessly slashing at the 3. Only here's where the 3 work together, actually. As they work together, their compatibility ratings skyrocket, with Hayato landing the final blow. The villains are quite clearly looking at this. Yeah, I have a problem with this episode. It's trying to preach that it's good to work as a team and it's better to work as a team, but we really never see what it takes to be on a team. Everyone sort of just follows Hayato's lead. And I get he's the main character, but when you're dealing with an episode with teamwork and antics about team members not getting along, it's kinda hard to actually take the preaching seriously, or even seeing it consistently. Anyone who has worked with a high school theater knows that productions are team efforts that certain actors treat like their own solo shows. How does one balance such personalities and skills that are necessary? Which is why I hoped I would have seen something like that from Akta or Siranuki. Oh well, maybe it can come up in a future episode. Then we open the next episode with Shashot ordering lunch. He's basically wanting to take care of Hayato ever since his dad is basically gone to Kyoto. Futaba's named acting director. Meanwhile, Shashot is trying to fill that void. Link combination is introduced. It's what you think it is. It's a giant robot show that would utilize fusion. What giant robot show wouldn't utilize fusion? Fusion is just a cheap tactic to make weak gems stronger. Yada yada. Yeah, so this simulation fails because, well, Hayato is so desperate to succeed that he's forgetting everything else. Shashot is getting advice from Siranuki to be single-minded, just like the driver and the conductor. Yeah, this is a literal-minded robot. This can only end poorly. So, apparently Hayato keeps a diary. Big mistake. And it's ending poorly because Shashot is reading it. And Hayato tells Shashot there's this thing called boundaries. And of course, Hayato's family is going to flip out over this. And of course, Hayato's next door neighbor is a nutty YouTuber who will also flip out over this. Oh boy, a robot managing your private life. I think that there could be a nice joke about social media on your phone right here. Oh boy, Shashot is trying to tiger parent Hayato. Oh boy. Yeah, you can see where this plot is headed to. The kids get an early morning call. So early that Hayato isn't even wearing pants. This wouldn't be relevant if Shashot didn't critique his underwear choices in the very next line. What? Like, what? Is there really an underwear hierarchy in Japanese elementary and middle schools? I'm asking this rhetorically because I know someone in the comments section is actually going to write out a deliberate answer. I don't want to know. So basically, Shashot and Hayato are going to be at each other's throats throughout the fight, even though everyone thinks Shashot's actions are disturbing. Yes, even Futaba. During a fiery festival, the black particles merge with the flames, something that surprises everyone because the fire is practically intangible. It's not taking up the wood with it, it's just taking the fire. The reason is that humanity has conquered fire, not merely growing around it like some trees and seeds do, but also to keep it and shape it in multiple ways, such as steel refineries. Suddenly, the E5 can't move. Yeah, Hayato and Shashot are both needed for it, and Akta does the straightforward plan, while Hayato is frozen, of just dousing the enemy in fire. However, the narrative law of explaining plans takes full effect. The success of a plan is inversely proportional to how much it is explained. Okay, it's more complicated why it didn't work. Basically, there are some fuels that you can just douse with water easily, such as wood, cloth, and plastic. Hell, if a show is more sciencey, there are certain chemicals that when burned can burn through concrete and asbestos, but it just uses the gasoline, propane, and cooking oil. If you pour water on them, they won't go out bit. So how the hell do you put out flames made out of the black particles? Well, Shasha and Hayato have been arguing to the point that Siranuki tells them to knock it the hell off with a punch. You know, if he didn't succeed, they're getting a giant bill that says giant fist imprint in Shinkalion. Hayato gets called out for basically doing everything himself, even though this is a team effort. And honestly, this is the most practical proverb Siranuki has thrown out on the battlefield. Akta compliments him for getting the E5 back online. Siranuki even offhandedly suggests the way to beat the giant monster's being: breath. All fires need oxygen. Drain the air. On an industrial level, this is a solution to some extent. You can't smother it with water, then you try to dilute the oxygen to break the triangle. Sometimes it involves flooding the burning chamber with nitrogen gas or carbon dioxide, Though on a practical level, draining the air also means you drop the pressure, so you can see why people tend to just dilute things with nitrogen gas or carbon dioxide and not, drain the entire chamber of oxygen and air in general, because a pressure drop is no joke, and things can be crushed like a Coke can if you drop the pressure too much. Suranuki says link combination would work, and after all, Futaba points out the E7 is designed for mountains. Mountain atmosphere is thinner, and thus the pressure is a bit lower. This can work. E5 and E7 link, proceeds to one-shot the monster, the villains observe, and the heroes manage to see the villains for the first time. All wells ends well, like Suranuki claiming credit for basically telling Hayato and Shasha to get their shit together. I honestly like this episode better than episode 7. I do like the idea that desperation for success can often harm success, which honestly is a better moral for this kind of show and demographics. Not to mention, it does address a bit of my issue with the whole Hayato basically leaping in and Akta and Tsurunugi just sort of following him. Also, back to the theater bit, I can tell you people who didn't learn the idea that, hey, maybe your craving for success is a weakness in and of itself. However, I found Shashot's antics to be more annoying than Hayato's craving for success, to the point that Shashot's stupidity and sleaziness ends up overshadowing Hayato's own flaws, which honestly is to the episode's detriment. But those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.